Hi, everybody. Welcome to Yang Shen, Nourishing Life. We're going to take just a few minutes to let people arrive. So get settled in and get ready for a great connect and learn. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and start. Welcome, everybody. This Connect and Learn is presented by Bill Helm, Yang Sheng, Nourishing Life. I'm Deborah Valentine Smith. I'm the current president, and our production team is Wayne Milan, our managing director, and Brian Scow, who's our communications consultant. So just a few housekeeping tips. In this webinar, you are in listen mode only. We can't see or hear you, but we can communicate with you through the chat and Q&A functions. So if you have questions as we go along for Bill, please type them into the chat or the Q&A function. Brian's going to be monitoring that. And at the end of the presentation, we'll be sending those questions on to Bill for a little discussion of them. This webinar is going to be recorded, and the recording will be made available to you and to those who couldn't make it at this time on the event listing of this webinar on the AOBTA website calendar. So just a little tip, in the upper right corner of your screen, you'll see gallery view or speaker view, which give you the choice of leaving the form you are currently in. If you see gallery view, leave the setting alone. If you see speaker view as a choice, please click on it. So to introduce Bill Helm, who is an AOBTA CI in Tuina and medical Qigong. In addition to ABT, he holds certifications as a holistic health practitioner, as a Dao Sure, a Taoist priest, and Sixth Duan Wei, a senior instructor in the Chinese Wushu Association. Bill has served on the AOBTA Board of Directors and has always served on the committee which handles the certification of AOBTA instructors. He serves on the faculty and as department chair for the bodywork program at Pacific College of Health Science. He's presented at many AOBTA conventions and will be presenting 2 workshops at the convention April 30th to May 9th. One of those workshops will be continuing the presentation on Yang Sheng, and a second will be on joint mobilization for Asian bodywork therapists. You'll just find the descriptions on the convention website, which you get to through aobta.org. So welcome, Bill. Thank you so much. Take it away.
All right, thanks for the nice introduction. Well, welcome, everybody. Uh-oh. We're going to be talking about Yang Sheng today. Yang Sheng literally means nourishing life. And it's actually an older tradition than what we think of as Qigong and so forth, because it utilizes principles that predate the use of the term Qigong. Qigong is relative by Chinese medical standards and Chinese history standards, a relatively recent term. There's no traces of it before the 1500s. Before then, they used the terms Tu Na and Dao Yin. And when I was in China the first time in 1986 at the Shanghai College of Chinese Medicine studying Tuina, we went and visited a Qigong Research Institute around the corner. And at that institute, there was a room upstairs, and it was, fairly decent sized room, packed with bookshelves, thousands of books. And there was a little guy in a white outfit, and his job was to identify in Chinese written language every reference to the term Qigong. And so I was very excited. I thought, oh, finally going to find out, what the true meaning is, what the true origin is, and what's the original Qigong, because at that point I was quite a bit younger. And so we asked the guy about it, and he said, well, so far we found 1,300 different distinct styles of Qigong in reference. And that's just in written reference. So clearly Qigong and those practices is multiple. But the Yang Sheng idea describes the mind-body cultivation practice. And in that practice, we're looking at a variety of different traditions that we now identify. Previously, it was like all of those things were within the context of a practice. So these traditions are Qigong, but also herbal medicine. And it's important to remember that herbal medicine in its earliest standards, other than immediate first aid stuff, was often associated with Taoist practices. And Taoist practices were looking at using substances to become immortal initially. And it didn't work out so well because some of the things, mercuric sulfide, the cinnabar, were pretty toxic when they were distilled down. But it was also one of the early ways of alchemy and then moved into the chemical branch. But herbal medicine, in terms of prolonging life and maintaining health, Ron Teagarden has a book on herb tonification. And the idea of using it as a separate from fixing particular problems is the idea within Yang Sheng. Acupuncture was used, Tui Na Amo, self-massage practices, which sort of blends together some of the Qigong practices, breathing and points, and then using self-massage as a way of maintaining your health. Feng Shui, so that you can live in an environment that has a regulated flow of qi through it. Divination arts, so these vary. The most famous one is the I Ching. And the I Ching is used in order to understand the flow of qi as it manifests, right? So if you understand how the qi is manifesting, it enables you to make better choices. Not always good choices, but better choices. Martial arts are important both for physical health because of the exercise component, but also to protect yourself from malevolent influences in your environment who manifest as physical attacks. Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism were all used within the framework of this as a theoretical background. So the main goals in Yang Sheng, first of all, is to maintain and extend life, right? So we want to, many people get involved in this later in life, at which point you've already aged a certain point, right? So the idea with this is to learn how to maintain your life and to extend it by nourishing it, right? These are the positive action steps. And then the next part of it is to mitigate the forces of entropy. The process of aging is essentially entropic. That is, at a certain point, we all leave this particular body. And mitigating those forces is one of the ways that's important for that. And that has to do a lot with being able to avoid negative behaviors and avoid the negative consequences of behaviors that you may do. Then enhancing the forces of longevity, right? What are the forces of longevity? Well, your qi, your blood, your shen. So how do we enhance those? There's substances, there's behaviors, there's qigong practices. And all this concept is illustrated in the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu's famous book. This is an excerpt from chapter 50. And in this, he says, those who know how to live can walk abroad. That is, you can go anywhere. Those who follow Tao and cultivate and nourish themselves create a body-mind that maintains its harmony and integrity under all circumstances. So the idea within this framework is the closer you are to the Tao that's manifest in the world, the easier it is to maintain your harmony and your integrity. And integrity means basically that you don't fall apart, right? That you're able to maintain yourself and structure. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Taoism was important in terms of the concepts of longevity and immortality. And then the famous Yellow Emperor's classic of internal medicine, the HUANG Di Ne Jing. There's a number of passages about this, but this is probably the crux of it. And it follows with the Tao Te Ching, chapter 50. Those who disobey the laws of the universe will give rise to calamities and visitations. That means bad things will happen to you. While those who follow the laws of the universe remain free from dangerous illness, for they are the ones who have obtained Tao the correct way. So this process of obtaining Tao in a practical view has to do with the Sanbao, the three treasures, the Shen, Qi, Jing, which is also the theme for the convention that's coming up. And the idea here is to nourish and preserve these three fundamental substances and functions of human beings. So not only are they substances, that is something within the framework of the body, but they're also part of our functions, how we function in life. And the essence of it is to develop life habits, the way of living, and again, closer to the Tao, the better the habits, that enhance formation of these substances. And those positive habits help you with number 3 here, which is to avoid the rapid dissipation and disintegration of these substances. So a negative lifestyle with lots of toxic things and behaviors and so forth speeds up the dissipation of these fundamental substances that we acquire through birth. And we can think of this also as our prenatal chi. And these things dissipate, right? They dissipate because of those things that we take into our body and because of the behaviors and things that we're with. So the foundation of all Yang Sheng practices is found in the Wenzi. And here, the body is the temple of life. Qi is the force of life. Shen is the governor of life. If one of them goes off balance, all three become disordered. So the Trinity is the important part. They have to be ordered. And when there's an imbalance in one, there's an imbalance in the others. When the body leads the way, the spirit goes along, and this harms all three treasures. So the implication here is that when we accede to our strictly physical, and I hesitate to use the term primal, but the idea of just our body's feelings and desires, that it takes our spirit along and it harms all three treasures. So there's an element here where we have to discipline and balance the body so that it harmonizes and supports our spirit rather than taking us down the rabbit hole of dissipation. When the spirit takes command, the body naturally follows it, and this benefits all three treasures. So the Shen, the spirit, the mind, needs to be the ruler. It needs to help the body follow and benefit all three of these treasures. So in his book, Peter Deadman, who wrote the classic on acupuncture points, he has a book on Yang Sheng called Live Well and Live Long. And it's a great book. It's very comprehensive. He covers a variety of different topics in great detail. I highly recommend it. But he talks about 3 ways to cultivate health and longevity. And this echoes what we've seen so far. Again, the theme is the same throughout. So first of all is to avoid behavior that causes harm. All right, we try and avoid the things that will cause harm to our body, whether this is drugs and alcohol or jumping motorcycles across canyons or things that can cause death and immediate dissipation. And what we want to do is behave in ways that actively promote health and well-being. And this is often difficult for the average person because they may not have a good sense of this. And a lot of what we do in our practices, or perhaps I should say should do, is to help to educate people in terms of what can promote their health and well-being, to give them tools to understand why they need to do certain things and avoid others, because it's not always obvious to people. So do activities to deliberately nourish life. And this is the part, I know in my practice, I'm always recommending these types of things. One of them is meditation. And this can be pretty much any form of meditation. There are a tremendous amount of classic meditation tools available. There are a lot of more modern tools. The whole process of mindfulness has become quite widespread. It's taken from Buddhism, but the idea of focusing our mind to pay attention and doing it in either a static or moving position is a fundamental part. And this is fundamentally to help stabilize the Shen. That is to get the Shen more focused. Second one is slow breathing. Being able to regulate the breath helps to calm the body. It helps to regulate the qi. And we know that when people are anxious, they take short breaths, they're usually quicker. So one of the things I try and do in my Tuina practice with people is to get them to breathe. If you can get a person to breathe slowly and more deeply in their lower belly, right away they start to relax. Right away they start to activate their restorative functions. This type of slow, deep breathing helps to activate, in the Western sense, the parasympathetic nervous system, the restorative system. And often people I'll get them to breathe a little bit, using some hands-on, and all of a sudden their intestines start to gurgle and they're starting to growl and they're starting to relax, and they're often, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. People always apologize when their body starts to act normal. But this is what we're looking for, is to get the person to slow down. And then Qigong practices. There's a lot of Qigong systems available these days. When I first started studying this material in like 1973, there was very little available, and most of it was within the framework of traditional martial art practice. And you were taught certain exercises for increasing your qi and so forth. My Taoist teacher, who grew up, Master Sherke Lu, in southern China in the Lofoshan mountain temple, he had a wide variety of practices. I mean, one of the things that was really fascinating to me was, instead of, some sort of very limited type of thing, there was this catalog of exercises for moving the qi and focusing the Shen and a variety of things. So these days there's lots of options, but having a Qigong practice, and I differentiate Qigong from yoga and stuff. You'll see in the next part there, yoga is part of the internal physical arts. The Qigong practice is focusing on specifically the qi moving, getting it into better balance, harmonizing it, and so forth. And then it's important to practice an internal physical art. So within the framework of Taoism and sort of more generalized temple practices, Tai Chi Chuan is one, although it really varies. but having some kind of physical practice that combines martial function with energetic function is really helpful. And this can also be yoga and a variety of other practices that are not necessarily Chinese, but have the quality of disciplining and strengthening the body separate from an eyes closed energy-based practice. And then the last one that's probably the biggest problem here in the West, although China it's the same thing as fat people now if they have food, is to balance the quantity of food eaten, to not overindulge in food. And we know from our Chinese medical studies that problems in balance of food and type create problems associated with the spleen and the liver and the stomach. And so it's important for longevity to have a limited amount to balance it. DEADMAN also considers 3 major factors for longevity and health. And these are the things that are sort of like, you know, some you can do something about and some you can't. And the first one is inherited constitution. You know, when you get your primal chi, your primordial chi, your yuan chi from your parents, that's your inherited constitution. And some people have stronger, more functional constitution. Other people have weaker constitution. And all constitution does is it gives you clues about how to move forward. Because sometimes, and if you listen to stories about Chinese masters and martial art masters and yoga masters, you know, most of the great masters didn't start out as, you know, big, healthy people. They ended up in these things because they were not, right? They had poor constitution, they had illnesses, and then through their practices, they strengthened themselves and became, you know, guiding examples of the value of some of these practices. And then the other thing that you can't do anything about in this life to start with is good or bad fortune. And the Indians have a good term for that, karma, right? Cause and effect. And they look at it over lifetimes. But within the framework of our current life, we have to look at what happens in terms of our behavior and where we end up. You know, if you were living in that village in India that was below that big glacier that just gave way and washed away 270 people, whether you were of great health or not, that's a bad fortune, right? Something happens that's bigger than your individual behavior. You just happen to be there. There's not much to be done about that except to, you know, produce as much good behavior going forward, which facilitates good fortune. And of course, the important factor is our behavior. How do we adapt to the constitutional limitations that we have? How do we adapt to the positive or negative benefits we have? You know, I know for myself, it's like, I would have loved to have grown up in Chen Village and studied with the great masters as a young child. But, you know, I grew up in the United States and I had to travel to China to study with these people, right? So it's like, it's what you do with what you get. That's the important part. DEADMAN talks about 4 legs to the practice of Yang-Sheng. And this makes for a stable chair, although, you know, 3 legs will make it stable too, but 4 is better. So the first is cultivation of mind and emotions. How do we cultivate the mind and our emotions? And this has a lot to do with balancing the emotions and developing the mind so that we have an understanding of emotions. A lot of times emotions, because they're so powerful, sweep over us and can cause us to behave in ways that we wouldn't rationally think of. You know, one of the classic ones is falling in love, right? Or getting really angry. Road rage is one of those things. So having a mind that understands the process of emotions and understands the place of emotions is extremely important because it can keep you from developing some bad fortune. If you end up in the wrong position and you react a certain way, bad things can happen. If you react another way, you can get out of that situation. Second one is regulation of the diet. We mentioned this before. Of course, this has to do with your particular constitution and your digestive system. We all come to these things with what we have. Where we've gotten to at that point as we become conscious of the needs for these things. So your diet needs to be appropriate for your body type and your particular pathology in terms of your digestive system. There are some ideal things, but ideal is not for everybody. You know, the principles of regulating your diet is what we want to look at. The third is cultivation of the body. So we looked at this a few moments ago. This has a couple things. One is we want to have chi-based practices, things that we're focusing on our chi development, but we also need to have a physically strong body. And so often you see these things somewhat, you know, as a continuum. There are some people who want to be more on the chi side and they don't want to do the hard exercise or cardio or things like that. Then you see people on the other side, they just want to, you know, go to the gym and, you know, run long distances and things like that. And both of those produce imbalance, right? We need physical strength. So cultivation means you have to get some exercise that's going to strengthen your body. And it never seems important to people when they're young, but let me tell you, when you get older, I'm 71 now, you want to make sure that you're keeping your muscles and bones strong. You know, it's not that your demands are what you might have had as a younger person, but you still have to walk around and function. So cultivating physical practices of energetics, flexibility within that framework. This is where yoga comes in a lot, and or any exercises that establish the movement and the full range of motion of the body are important. And then plain old resistance training of some type. Now, I personally like kettlebells. Kettlebells are these little cannonballs that have handles that you swing and move in different patterns. I like it because it goes with my Tai Chi practice, because there's a lot of use of the dantian or the core area. There's a lot of extension that doesn't make the body so tight. But you know, there's different practices. It's just important to have one. If you don't have one, you need to develop it and develop it slowly so that you don't injure yourself as you start to do it. And then the last one is a healthy sleeping pattern. Now, this is something that is a big problem, especially here in the West, but China as well. And that's getting enough sleep. You know, sometimes it's a function of insomnia. That is, you can't sleep, right? And we have a lot of people come into our practices who have difficulty sleeping. And some of it's a function of too much activity, doing too many things that take up so much time that by the end of the day, we're either totally exhausted or our mind is so activated, it's hard to turn it off. So these are the 4 legs according to DEADMAN. I also studied at the Shanghai College of TCM, and their take on it is pretty similar. And I like to give a variety of things so it's not one particular angle. So they have a very good book called Health Preservation and Rehabilitation. And health preservation, their definition is the adaptation of humans to nature. And this goes with the Taoist idea of being in the flow of Tao. Tao, in its most important manifestation, is nature, the seasons, the cyclicity, the growth and decline. So to preserve your health, you have to adapt to nature. And from a Chinese medical point of view, this is where we look at references to external pathogens, right? To nature, to the different types of influences. I mean, fundamental weather practice. And you can look now, some of you maybe, I don't know where everybody is, but certainly I'm in San Diego. But I know my mother-in-law in Texas is having 9 degrees and she's not set up for it. People in New England are laughing, right? Other places, you know, it's like it's so cold and they're not used to it. And this produces a lot of life-threatening problems. One of them is hypothermia. So, but adaptation of humans to nature. The second one is an accomplishment of yin-yang balance. And this is right in the framework of our medicine. You know, the principles of yin and yang are fundamental to Asian bodywork practices, to Chinese medicine. And this is the idea of balancing between those two complementary polarities, the active and the rest, so on and so on. You know, and there's long lists of these things, but the basic idea is knowing when to let the yin predominate and when to let the yang predominate. And the third idea is that a strong body or a strong mind and a strong qi will balance the zangfu organs. So this can be taken both ways, right? One is a strong body will produce strong qi. A strong mind will regulate the qi. So these influences from the physical, mental, and energetic balance the zangfu organs, which are the determinants of our functional health, right? Our digestion, our ability to breathe and extract qi from the air, our ability to eliminate, our ability to reproduce. All of these things are regulated by the zangfu organs. So they have 4 categories, very much like DEADMAN's 4 legs. Right, first is cultivation of the mind. So one of the important aspects of cultivation of the mind is to give your mind input from classical sources, reading spiritual texts. I really love to read the AOBTA CI and CHUANG. You know, I like the I-Ching, but things that cultivate the mind to a higher level, not so much like memorizing herbs, that's a type of cultivation of the mind, but the idea of coming to understand the principles of the universe. How does the universe function? How can we use our mind to understand the universe and then help our body move with that, help our qi develop with that? Second one is moderation of work and rest. And this goes right with that principle of yin and yang. We have to balance this. And we know that as a culture, and it's not just here, it's in China too, we overvalue work and we undervalue rest. All right, so we exhaust our yang and we fail to restore our yin. And this causes us to decline. This is a basis for aging. We use up that qi, we use up those substances, and then we age. And it can be graceful if you're able to balance that, or it can be really rough. And ask a lot of old people how they like aging, and they say, I prefer it to the alternative, but it ain't so great. Third one is regulation of the diet. We mentioned this before. And the fourth one is the balance of normal life. This means being part of society, being engaged, but also having a home life that's nourishing, that supports you. And this facilitates being able to rest. So let's look a little bit more at the Shen, right? One of those fundamental substances. So the Shen is important to cultivate and harmonize mind and emotions. And we mentioned the ability to understand universal principles as a fundamental part of harmonizing the mind, so the mind can understand and help to regulate and harmonize the emotions. It helps to balance the vital substances in the zangfu organs. That is, our Shen helps organize the qi. You know, one of the functions of the Shen is it configures the qi. It helps to direct the movement of the qi. And this harmonious circulation of qi and blood through the channels and collaterals our ability to use our mind to promote activities and through meditation and Qigong practices to directly affect the circulation of Qi and blood through the channels and collaterals. The Shen also supports consciousness, thinking, feeling. All of these things come from the Shen. So it's not just the mental aspect, it's its ability to configure the process of Qi. And we know when we see people who are what we would call Shen disturbed, right? Their mind is not functioning well. They're broken in a certain way. They cannot configure their energetic function and their mental function, their emotional function, to be able to connect with the world around them in a very fundamental way. So the heart houses the Shen. The heart is the commander of the other organs, but it also is the basis for housing the Shen. It's where the Shen, where the mind goes to rest and to be nourished. When the heart is unbalanced, and this can be through emotions, it can be through heart disease, the Shen is dysfunctional, and that results in the organs becoming unbalanced, and that ultimately results in pathology. So Giovanni MACCIOCIA had quite a bit to say about the Shen functions, and he has a pretty extensive list here of all the different aspects of what the Shen does and how it regulates. So first one is thinking. Second one is memory. And we know when people lose their memory, their thinking becomes disturbed. Consciousness, the ability to know and to be present in your body and in your environment. Insight, the ability to understand in an intuitive way your own process and the process of others. Emotional life, again, when the Shen is disturbed, our emotions are disturbed. Cognition, just the ability to formulate mental process. Sleep, being able to sleep well. And one of the ideas with this, I've often liked this image. One of my teachers described it. You know, when the heart is disturbed, the Shen cannot rest. And they describe it as a bird that cannot go to its nest. It has to sit on a branch, and it becomes shattered and disheveled and upset, right? Being able to rest in the heart allows us to restore ourselves. It also has a function with basic intelligence, being able to clearly understand things. Wisdom is the accumulation of the knowledge of errors. The mistakes that were made by you and others are acquired as wisdom. And ideas, generating new ideas to help yourself and others. So heart disturbances affect all of these things. So again, three treasures, right? Shen lives in the heart, important function. The Qi, vital energy, activates the functions of the body. And the Jing is the essence, it's the physical substrate that activates biochemical actions of growth, reproduction, and repair. The three treasures are mutually reinforcing. They represent various stages of refinement of the original Qi. And in some Taoist practices, they talk about utilizing the energy from the lower Dantian to generate Qi, moving up to the middle Dantian to generate Shen, moving up to the upper Dantian. So Jing, Qi, Shen. Cultivation, again, these are the same concepts over and over, right? Shen, reading and discussing topics that require developing rational and logical thinking, seeing relationships. So studying Chinese medicine is a great way to develop your Shen, to be able to use rational and logical thinking to see the relationships within the framework of an individual's pathological influences. Qi, regulating the diet, it's the same story, right? Now, the idea with this is to include seasonal foods and 5 flavors. And dietary therapy is an important aspect of Chinese medicine. Again, we eat according to the seasons. So probably a lot of people in those colder areas are not going to 7-Eleven and getting those quart big gulps full of ice and soda, right? It's like, or they may be. And again, the results are the same. But trying to eat things in accordance to the season and to use the 5 flavors so we don't just eat the same thing. Cultivating the qi, modifying lifestyle include balance of work, life, rest, general activity levels, and intake of recreational substances. So again, this is about, and recreational substances. Now that pot is being legalized all over, there's a greater sort of desire to use that type of substance. Alcohol has always been an issue. Small amounts, okay, big amounts, not. Okay. Again, developing the qi, exercise, and these are the 3 main components: movement, resistance, relaxation. Cultivating the jing, we have to moderate sexual practices. And in this framework, there's like self-sex and sex with others. And having these in a moderate amount is extremely important for men in terms of ejaculation, and for women in terms of just not getting pregnant or getting exposed to sexual diseases. A lot of herbal supplements can be used to strengthen the jing. This is one of the areas of Chinese medicine that's very helpful. And then we want to look at the 3 dantians. So one of the ways of sort of the shortcut to the 3 treasures is the 3 dantians. Right, 3 dantians. Dantian means elixir field. And from a Taoist perspective, these were the idea that elixirs of immortality were cultivated in these areas. Tian literally means field. So the most common way of looking at it is the lower dantian, or the hara. Japanese practitioners all know what the hara is. Basically, it's that energy center in the belly, the lower belly below the navel. The middle dantian is the heart, the center of the chest. And the upper dantian is the center of the forehead. So Jing in the lower, Qi in the middle, and Shen in the upper. So these 3 need to be balanced. And Robert Peng, who's a well-known Qigong teacher, has a whole process of personality types based on the activities of the dantians. And it's important to understand that in this concept and in this framework, we're constantly interacting with each other from the energies of these 3 centers. These 3 centers are feeling other people's energy, and we're projecting energy ourselves. So our ability to know what we're projecting from there is important. So people who tend to be predominantly lower dantian have a stronger physical base. They have a way in which they want to always barge in or move in with power, right? Often there's a hypersexuality associated with it. Middle dantian is the sensitive, heart-based person whose open-heartedness is moving forward from there. Often they suffer from a certain amount of weakness on the physical level. Upper dantian is the person who's always moving from the mind, trying to explain things to you. If only you understood, then you would change, right? And this is a common dilemma. So what we do in the 3 dantians is we want to develop and balance each area. And we need to make an honest assessment of which one is more active or weaker in order to focus development. So at this moment, I want to do just a very short meditation to help you touch in with those 3 dantians. So if you just sit with your hands in your lap over your lower belly, your lower dantian, put your tongue on the roof of the mouth, and then begin to focus on your breathing into your belly. And then as you inhale, imagine drawing energy into your lower dantian. And as you exhale, radiate that energy out to the universe. So inhaling, drawing energy in. Exhaling, radiating energy out. Then put your awareness in your middle dantian, center of your chest, between your breasts. And again, inhaling, drawing energy in. Exhaling, radiating energy out to the universe. Then put your awareness in your upper dantian, center of the forehead. And again, inhaling, drawing energy in. Exhaling, radiating energy out to the universe. Now just observe all three dantians. Get a feeling of all three dantians. And observe which you feel the strongest, which you feel the weakest. And then exhale through the mouth, slowly open your eyes. So hopefully this was helpful. I'm going to turn it back over to our mediators.
Thank you, Bill. Most excellent. I don't have any questions from the other attendees yet, but I've a few questions myself. You mentioned kettlebells and reading, and I imagine you have a consistent Qigong and Tai Chi Chuan practice. I'm thinking that personal examples can be really enlightening and interesting. So I'm wondering if you would share more of your daily and weekly routine.
Yeah, I do a lot of standing meditation, Zhuang. Within the framework of the Tai Chi style that we practice, it's a regular feature of that. So that's one part. The other part is that I also practice HUANG, which is a more extensive type of Zhuang practice or standing meditation, but involves standing, moving, and walking practices. It has a lot of similarities to Tai Chi, but you know, and then you know, I do kettlebells a couple times a week, and I do some on my own. There's a couple exercises that sort of function as a wake up. I do some deadlifts and some side squats, and that kind of gets my legs and stuff going. And then I teach at the acupuncture college, you know, Tai Chi Qigong class, and do a variety of different practices within that framework and so on. And I
Good.
have some early morning meditation that I do between 4 and 5 that helps me kind of mentally balance for the day.
Good, thank you for that. So I do have a question from Wendy Klauser,
Mhm.
and she's wondering if you could repeat the personality types of the 3 burners.
Oh, the 3 Dantians. Yeah. Yeah. So Robert Peng has it's got it online, a good breakdown of all of it. But fundamentally, people who are more developed in the lower Dantian, because that's the hara and the physical aspect, and we often associate that with nature and the earth, right? Tend to be more dynamic physically, will have a tendency to push in and want to either let's just say that they tend to use their physical prowess as a way of initiating and controlling things. And they'll often have sexual issues in terms of overuse of sexuality in the framework. The middle Dantian, the heart center, that's more emotional. It's the spiritual, the love center, so people there who are balanced in that area more tend to come into a situation much nicer people, much more sweet. The dilemma for them is that they're often physically weak. That is, they don't develop the stronger. There's often that type has a judgment about the lower type, right? So these people will tend to be more ascetic. Upper Dantian is the intellectual type. And here the overbalance is that they usually want to explain to you why you're wrong. They're very smart, they can put together things, and they can quote you things and so forth. Again, the weakness here is that they often lack emotional connection. It's like if you connect with them, it's going to be through the mind. If you connect with the heart person, it's emotions. And if you connect with the lower person, it's physical activity.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I certainly can think of a number of people I know for each of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have to balance all 3 of them. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's the ultimate thing, and that helps us maintain our 3 treasures.
Yeah. Yeah, I have another question. This one's from Nadia Gagnon in Quebec City.
Hi, Nadia.
And she asks, what do you think about this new trend of exposing the body to extreme cold? I'm thinking about the Wim Hof method, I suppose.
And cryotherapy, you can go to places and they'll freeze the hell out of you. I'm not a big fan of that, but partly because I'm old and I don't have the dedicated desire to overcome nature anymore. I think there's some value to the whole concept of the breathing and all that. I'm just not particularly a fan personally.
Yeah.
If I lived in Quebec, I might be more of a fan.
Yeah, so then I'm thinking on the other side of that, in Japan, the onsen is so popular, and I certainly get a lot of benefit myself from hot soaks. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I like hot soaks. My personal preference is saunas because I tend to run a little damp, so that soaking in hot water, while it eases my body aches, but it tends to promote dampness, whereas a sauna tends to, you sweat and it helps you lose dampness and you get the value of the heat. But again, I think it's more personal preference on that, but just my type.
I suppose environment comes into play there too, where in San Diego, you have quite a bit of more humidity than I have here in Arizona.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But not like Louisiana, thank God. Nothing against Louisiana.
Yeah, and then Nadia followed up with the personal constitution aspect also.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
So I have a question again. I have a compo practice, and in that we tend to diagnose and then apply the appropriate formula. So it's a matter of imbalance, right?
Right.
But I've personally been known to top off with a bit of Sichuan Dabutang. So would that be more of the Taoist longevity approach, where some of those tonifying formulas?
Yeah, I mean like Sichuan Dabuan or the Jingwei Shenchuan, the 8 treasures, blanking on the, but yeah, those are more general constitutional formulas. for more general things, I mean, obviously those you can get more easily as capsules or the little pellets. Some of the other formulas where you're doing more specifically for a pathology is different.
Yeah, good. Okay, we have a couple of questions in Q&A. Let me go there. Joanne Mondras is asking, in the Qigong I have been doing, they emphasize storing Qi in the lower Dantian, not sending it out like is done by Heart Center and Upper Dantian. Is that just the form I am studying?
Well, I think a lot of that has to do with, trying to accumulate the Qi in the body. The exercise that we did is on some level diagnostic, but on another level just activating. I wouldn't recommend it as the only thing you did. The important part initially is to store Qi in the Dantian, the lower Dantian, so that you strengthen your body. But then it needs to move and be allowed to develop in those other areas. So a lot of times those practices will go to what's called a microcosmic orbit, where you're circulating it up the spine, down the front, or directing it in particular areas.
Yeah, so I'm always reminded that we have to strengthen, and we have to balance, and we have to flow, right? So there would be practices for all of those. And Karen Elisa asks, do you find that people may sedate a particular jiao as a coping mechanism?
I would probably want to use the term disperse. That is, they'll tend to move that energy out. But yeah, I mean, blockage, technically it's not necessarily sedation. I mean, it becomes the basis for, obstruction. But yeah, I mean, people will tend to dissipate in a variety of ways, and it can certainly be that.
Okay, and one more question from Natalie De Pastas in Zhengzhuan, quieting mind and heart in lower Dantian, a way to cultivate mind and emotions as you were explaining. Is doing Zhangzhuang.
Oh, Zhangzhuang. Yeah, so one thing is that Zhangzhuang has a lot of different emphasis depending on the system that you work within the framework of. In the Taiji practice, first stage is looking at alignment, trying to get the body lined up, trying to allow the Qi to sink, right? We want the yin Qi to sink so the lower body becomes heavy, and that allows the yang Qi to rise up. So first stages is usually, and that's the trouble with any of the Zhangzhuang practices, they're not a fun yoga class or something like that. It's like it's work, it's painful at times, you're sweating, things like that. So people don't get past that first part very much. But once you start to develop the Qi to get the Qi to sink, then the yang Qi rises up and it goes through the Dantians, and your Bai Hui point opens and you're seeing white light and things like that. So, but that's not a primary stage.
Okay. And Jamie Kemper has a question. Is there a particular meditation you recommend first thing in the morning to set the path of the Tao and smooth flow of the three treasures?
It's going to depend on what your availability is, since there's a variety of symptoms. I mean, the most important part, my Taoist teacher, Cherke Lu, said, the most important meditation was to sit and follow your breathing, right? Either in cross-legged or in a chair or laying down. And that ties into an old practice in Taoism. It's one of the classical practices called sitting and forgetting, right? You sit and you allow the mind to go away. And you do that by focusing on your breath. And pretty soon all you're feeling is your breath. Well, I don't know, pretty soon is the right way to say that. Ideally, you're feeling your breath. And then from there, it moves on. Right? And because that sets your point of reference for the rest of the day.
Yeah, a foundational practice. And then we're right on the hour, but I want to take one more question before we go to DVS for a wrap up. Donald Myers asks, can Bill talk a bit about visualization versus feeling in Qigong meditation practices in the context of humans overusing eyes and optic nerves through computers, smartphone, TV use?
Well, so visualization is the use of the visual imagery in order to elicit certain kinds of chi activation and so forth. Like one of the things I teach at the college is a 5-element color visualization for the organs, right? You visualize the heart red and so on. That's one type of practice. There's another practice for the eyes that we do called Shen candle, which is a candle meditation where you're focusing on the candle flame with your eyes, focusing in one point, and that produces a very strong concentration, and it overcomes, when you're watching a screen, it's a limited field like we're all experiencing right now, right? When you limit that down to one point, it tends to help your eyes focus more and helps your Shen focus to become more concentrated. One of the best remedies for problems of looking at the screen too much is go for a walk in the park. Go out and see some trees, see something green, give your liver a break.
Good, thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Bill. And people, if you have further questions, I really want to invite you to visit Bill and his workshop at the convention. Again, you can find the information, all the details and everything on AOBTA.org, and then click on visit the convention site. So many of our presenters that we've had over the last year and a half are going to be there. So I just really want to encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity to meet with these great people. So the convention is going to be spread over 2 weekends from April 30th to May 9th. Instead of having 3 workshops at a time, we're doing them one at a time, and we're doing them virtually so you can attend, as many as you want. And they will also be recorded, so those who register will have access to all the workshops. I just want to encourage also those of you who are interested in helping to shape the convention. Our convention committee meeting is going to be this Friday, February 19th. And if you just send me an email at president@aobta.org, I'll get you hooked up to the link for that meeting. And then our member meeting is on Thursday, February 25th at noon. And we're going to be just talking generally about the kinds of self-cultivation that people do. So please join us there. Our next Connect and Learn is on March 17th with Dr. Doan Kaneko, who probably many of you know. He's been a long-time contributor to AOBTA and a long-time master of shiatsu. So we're really looking forward to these things coming up. So again, thank you so much, Bill, for the presentation. It was lovely to really go into those things. And we're looking forward to the convention presentation. So take care.
Thank you very much.
And we're going to hang on a little bit after people leave.